Now, we are going to get an expert's perspective on what is a packed week of diplomacy here in Korea. Joining us live on Skype is Dr. Mark P. Barry, an independent Asian affairs analyst with 30 years of experience on matters related to the Koreas, Northeast Asia and the U.S. policy in the region. So, Mark, the top diplomats, as we've been talking about, of South Korea and Japan are due to meet in Beijing. This is Seoul and Tokyo remain locked in a dispute over trade and historical issues. How do you expect the talks to go? And are you concerned that South Korea might announce this weekend its intent to withdraw from this General Security and Military Information Agreement, GSOMIA, with Japan if the meeting aggravates what is an already precarious situation?
Good morning, Mark. It already is precarious, and the last thing that South Korea should do is make it worse. GSOMIA is extremely important. It's something that South Korea realized it needed 2 administrations back because South Korea does not have the same radar and satellite capabilities that Japan possesses. So it's very important for the U.S. The Trump administration, by the way, supports the continuation of GSOMIA, which was kind of sealed under the last months of the Obama administration. So most important thing is don't aggravate things any further. I don't know how much can be accomplished in the meeting, but I feel that even though it's 4 days before the deadline, or 3 days, Korea time, before warning has to be given of pulling out of the GSOMIA, it's very important not to put that card on the table, because that doesn't deal with trade. It deals with the politico-military, which is a whole different level of problem.
Now, since these talks are happening in Beijing, do you expect China to use its regional influence to act as a kind of mediator of sorts in the Seoul-Tokyo trade dispute? And in regards to the other big player, of course, the U.S., do you think Washington has to really step up to the plate to stop Beijing really capitalizing on the weakness that's being shown by the Trump administration, its inaction, really, on this very serious issue?
Well, as far as China is concerned, you just showed a clip of the foreign minister of China encouraging both sides to peacefully and quickly resolve the dispute. I think that's the expected position that China will take. I think they would only get more deeply involved and try to mediate if they found that things were getting really out of hand and affecting the Chinese economy and affecting the stability of the region in a larger sense. But at the same time, China has its hands full. They have the Hong Kong protests. They're concerned about the Taiwan elections that will be held in January. And most importantly, they're in the middle of a very serious trade dispute with the United States, which will have ripple effects in the world economy well into 2020. So they're going to play it very carefully, but I don't see them stepping in for the United States. But what the U.S. does is, at this point, it's more watchful waiting.
And I'd like to shift gears somewhat to the breakdown of peace talks between the 2 Koreas. This after Pyongyang reacted so angrily to the recent Seoul-Washington joint drills and also President Moon's National Liberation Day speech that happened last week. Just walk us through why you think this process that seemed to be going so well in 2018, we had 3 inter-Korean summits last year, has ended so abruptly.
Well, the way you put the question, I would answer it this way. It's because of the failure of the Hanoi summit. And that was simply bilateral between the United States and North Korea. So it aggravates an existing situation. Now, one could also argue conversely that it's better to be criticized strongly than to be ignored. And that's what North Korea is doing. They have a reason to criticize because the joint exercises that concluded just yesterday were, although a command post exercise, were in fact simulations of the occupation of North Korea after a theoretical war, particularly the last 3 days of the exercises. So they were a cause of irritation. But the main thing is that the North does not want to push things forward with South Korea very much until they get things back on track with the United States, which really has not happened in the time since June 30th. At the same time, it's better to be criticized than to be completely ignored. So they're really saying to South Korea, please, is there something you can do to try to encourage the United States to do more? So I think that's really the reading between the lines.
Okay, and finally, before we have to let you go, the U.S. envoy on North Korea is in Seoul as we speak, Stephen Biegun. It seems like diplomacy between the North and the U.S. is also on shaky ground, despite what President Trump might say. Where do you see this process heading, especially given that Trump wants to get re-elected next year and doesn't want his rather unconventional, shall we say, North Korea policy to blow up in his face?
Well, first of all, the good news is that Ambassador Biegun looks like he's going to stay in his job. He's not going to be nominated as the ambassador to Russia. That would have sent a terrible signal for the U.S. DPRK negotiations. I don't necessarily expect him to meet at the DMZ with North Korean officials because it may be too soon. They have to go through their gyrations, and you have to give them time, and you have to give them leeway to do what they have to do. So they may not be ready to really seriously have working level talks until probably in September. But at the same time, based on the latest letter from Chairman Kim, Trump already said about a week or 10 days ago that he thinks there could be a third major summit in the not too distant future. So I think it could happen. It might be in Pyongyang. It might be in Mongolia. It could be in a third country that we don't expect. But the real issue is that the summits don't produce a result themselves. There has to be a willingness to make a series of deals that build up to a larger deal, which I think politically President Trump has great difficulty doing because his experience teaches him do it as one big package. And this is something that I don't think the North is willing to do for reasons of trust and reasons of their position of what national security really is.
Oh, so okay. So quickly, then, you're pretty pessimistic about the chances for any major developments in regards to denuclearization over the next, say, 12 months or so.
Well, you not only have the 2020 campaign in full swing, but more importantly, this president has never made a major deal. He's pulled out of a lot of deals. He's had bilateral trade renegotiations were a different matter, but this is a huge regional and even global national security issue. The president does not have a track record of actually solving something of this magnitude. So the question is President Trump ready to take a step-by-step approach, which is what President Moon is advocating and which is what North Korea is expecting and which China also is anticipating. So the question is, can the president adjust his expectations and find it politically useful to make progress? I fear he's afraid that it'll be misinterpreted, that a small deal will be seen as a bad deal, which goes back to the whole issue of the failure of the Hanoi summit. That whole dynamic has not been healthy, and I think we need to break that dynamic.
Okay, thank you very much for your insights, Mark. Very informative as always. We appreciate it, and we look forward to speaking to you next time. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, and happy 20th anniversary to Arirang News.
Oh, thank you very much.